Racist neighbor called police on black wedding. You won't believe who the groom was. This isn't just one story. It's a movement. Subscribe and like to be part of it. He thought it was the happiest day of his life. A beautiful wedding. Family gathered, music in the air, until a single phone call changed everything. One angry neighbor, blinded by hate, dialed the police with a false accusation. Within minutes, sirens replaced laughter, and fear replaced joy. But what none of them knew was that the man standing at the altar wasn't just any groom. He held a position of power that would shock everyone. Why did a simple celebration turn into a scene of humiliation? And how would the truth finally come out? Marcus Williams had always been a man who believed in hard work and quiet success. Born and raised in a small southern town, he grew up facing silent prejudice, but he built himself up, graduating top of his class, earning the respect of his community, and eventually becoming the mayor of that very town. His wedding day was meant to be a milestone not just for him, but for everyone who supported his journey. The garden was decorated with white flowers and golden lights. Laughter mingled with live music as relatives hugged, danced, and celebrated a love story that had overcome so much. His bride, Alicia, radiated joy as she walked down the aisle. Friends and neighbors whispered about how beautiful the ceremony was, a symbol of hope, progress, and unity. Children played near the fountain while elders wiped happy tears, grateful to witness such a meaningful union in their community. But just beyond the fence, someone else was watching, not out of joy, but with disgust. Claire Roberts, a longtime resident who detested the changing diversity of her neighborhood, stood behind her curtains, peering at the crowd. She believed the wedding was too loud, too crowded, and above all, inappropriate for her peaceful white neighborhood. As the music swelled and vows were exchanged, she pulled out her phone, already dialing the police with a trembling voice filled with false concern. No one inside the garden sensed the storm that was about to hit. To them, this was a celebration of love and progress. Little did they know, an act of quiet racism was about to turn their perfect day into a public spectacle. The police cars screeched to a halt outside the garden, just as the newlywed couple posed for photographs beneath a floral archway. Two officers stepped out, their hands already resting on their holsters, as the guests turned in confusion. The music faded. Whispers spread as Marcus glanced toward the gate, unsure why armed officers were walking toward his wedding party. For a moment, he wondered if something serious had happened in the neighborhood, until he saw the way they looked at him. "Sir, we received a noise complaint and reports of suspicious activity," one of the officers declared, scanning the crowd with narrowed eyes. Alicia's parents exchanged a startled glance while a few guests instinctively stepped back. Marcus approached calmly, trying to maintain composure. He introduced himself politely and asked what seemed to be the issue. The officers ignored his calm tone and asked for identification, not from anyone else, not even from the musicians or event organizers, just of Marcus and some of the black male guests standing nearby. Tension thickened as cameras came out. Some guests began recording quietly, sensing that this could quickly turn bad. Marcus handed over his driver's license, his heart pounding with anger and disbelief. The officers barely glanced at it and continued to question him in front of everyone. Who organized the event, whether he had a permit, who owned the property, and whether anyone had been drinking excessively. Every answer he gave was met with skepticism. Behind the fence, Claire watched with satisfaction, convinced she had done her civic duty. The officers, unaware of who Marcus truly was, kept interrogating him, even as a few guests protested and tried to explain who he was. One officer raised his voice, telling everyone to step back, and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder as if preparing to escort him out. That's when Marcus's best man stepped forward and shouted, "Do you even know who you're speaking to?" Silence fell over the crowd. The officers hesitated, momentarily thrown off by the sudden confidence in the man's voice. Marcus looked directly into their eyes, ready to reveal the truth. But before he could speak, one of the officers tightened his grip, signaling that things were about to escalate even further. And in that single moment, the entire wedding froze, caught between celebration and the threat of public humiliation. Marcus felt the officer's grip tighten on his suit jacket as whispers turned into uneasy silence across the garden. His bride stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock as one officer began to pull Marcus toward the patrol car. Children stopped playing, cameras focused on the scene, but none of it seemed to matter in that moment. All Marcus could feel was the heavy weight of humiliation in front of everyone he loved. He had worked his whole life to break barriers, and now, on the happiest day of his life, he was being treated like a criminal for simply celebrating his wedding. The crowd began to murmur louder. Some guests pleaded for the officers to stop. "You have the wrong man!" someone cried. But the officers kept moving, convinced they were restoring order. Marcus's chest tightened with rage and disbelief. He wasn't just being questioned. He was being dragged away in front of his wife, his community, and his future. As he was forced toward the car, he pulled himself upright and finally spoke with a voice that carried through the entire garden. "Officer," he said firmly, "before you go any further, you need to understand exactly who I am." The officer hesitated for a moment, confused by Marcus's sudden authority. The guests leaned in, breathless. Claire, still hiding behind her curtains, began to realize something was wrong, and just as the officer paused, Marcus took one final step forward, ready to reveal the truth that would change everything. The officer finally checked Marcus's ID again, this time reading it. His face went pale as he realized the man he was dragging was the elected mayor of the town. Shocked murmurs rippled through the gathering, and even his partner stepped back in disbelief. The grip on Marcus's jacket loosened instantly. The officer muttered a brief, stumbling apology, but the damage had been done. The celebration had been stained with humiliation, fear, and a painful reminder of how deep prejudice still ran, even against someone in power. Marcus walked back to his guests, head held high, though his heart was heavy. Alicia took his hand, and the crowd surrounded them with quiet support. They finished the ceremony, but the energy had changed. What was meant to be a day of unity had uncovered a truth many still tried to deny. Titles, achievements, and respect mean little to those blinded by hate. In the days that followed, videos of the incident went viral online. People expressed outrage, news outlets picked up the story, and Claire disappeared from her windows. But the story wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. Marcus gave a speech to his town weeks later, speaking not as a victim but as a mirror to a community that needed to face itself. He reminded them that racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers behind closed doors until it's forced into the light. This wasn't just his story. It's a story shared by countless others whose joy was interrupted by someone else's hate. And the question remains, how many more stories like this will it take before society truly changes?